Hello and welcome to the Elemental Entrepreneurship Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah. I am so excited for the conversation that we have available here for you today. So make sure you are prepared. You are listening. You are on a good walk. You're in your car. You have your ear pods on while your children scream in the background so that you can't hear them. Today, I'm speaking with Ginny Priem, who is a powerhouse keynote speaker, TEDx presenter, and best-selling author whose work focuses on leadership, emotional intelligence, and sustainable success. With more than 20 years of experience in corporate leadership, she brings a grounded perspective to conversations about ambition, burnout, and growth. In a culture that rewards constant output, Ginny helps people move forward with clarity, resilience, and intention. She's creator of the Unsubscribe framework, which helps high achievers make intentional change without losing momentum. Her podcast, Unsubscribe with Ginny Priem, explores the emotional shifts required to lead well today and has garnered more than 3 million video views on YouTube. Ginny, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I'm excited as well. So let's start with just dropping in and letting the audience know a little bit, in case they don't know you already from YouTube or your podcast, about who you are and the work that you do.
Well, you gave such a lovely introduction. I don't even know hardly what to add. I think maybe what I would add is my story is rooted in surviving a narcissistic relationship, an abusive relationship. And that's the story that I share in my first book. You mentioned, me being an author, and that's the story that you can find in You're My Favorite. And that experience, very harrowing, sent me on a journey of healing, self-discovery. Really, I call it like getting into alignment and returning to myself, becoming the most me version of myself yet. And that ultimately led me to leave my corporate career and start the business and the work that I do now as a keynote speaker and author, having my YouTube channel and podcast like you. So that's really kind of where it all started and what I'm really passionate about. But that's how everything has eventually evolved into the work that I do now with Unsubscribe and helping support people through, navigating difficult times. But now just really more about helping people perform better, lead better, and just live better lives.
Amazing. So talk to me a little bit about the Unsubscribe framework. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is?
Yeah, so the keynote and the title of the book are the same. It's kind of a fun one to be able to customize some of the keynotes that I do. Like next month, I'm doing a women's finance and agriculture event. And so we called it Unsubscribe, Let Go to Grow. Because the whole premise behind it, I call it Unsubscribe Why Letting Go is the Secret to Getting Ahead. That's the name of the book and the general name of my keynote. And so the idea is Unsubscribe is a filter to help you reclaim time, energy, and boundaries at work and in life. And it's built on 4 different pillars: manage, swap, mute, and block. And they all can kind of flow together. They're not mutually exclusive from one another, which makes it really fun. So manage is for the things that are most important and that do need attention, that you can't just walk away from. And I do want to talk a little bit about what Unsubscribe is and what it isn't. So it's not just about blowing everything up, burning it to the ground, and just leaving everything behind, right? I call it it's really an actionable tool. And you have to have accountability for the choices that you're making within it. So manage is for the things that do need attention. I'll use a really silly excuse or a really silly example that I encountered today with somebody who is a big, big fan of the book. And I happened to run into him today, and he was like, "Oh, Ginny, this should have been an unsubscribe for me. Our cleaning lady who we've been with for 20 years, she increased her rates and we just feel so loyal. So we couldn't totally unsubscribe. So we went down to every other week." And I was like, that's a perfect example of manage, right? Like you made it work for you while doing a minor unsubscribe and making it work, in a way that works for you. Swap is for things that are like outdated systems or outdated things or something that's just not working for you right now. I love using the example of exercise. If going for a run doesn't work for you right now, or high intensity interval training is too much, walk or do yoga. swap it for one of those, something that's more approachable. Or like, I think sometimes, especially as high achievers, which I think a lot of your audience fits into that category, is we get this all or nothing mentality. Well, if I can't work out, I only have 10 minutes. If I can't work out, then I might as well just do nothing at all. And we can kind of go down those traps, those mental traps of, beating ourselves up over things. So that's where swap can really come in handy. And then mute is for things that we need to take a break from. Maybe it is a relationship or a person, or maybe it's taking a break from a regularly scheduled meeting that you have that's just not serving a purpose right now. I love to use the example of dry January. That's a really good example of mute that people know. They take 31 days off of drinking. But again, that's not without action, accountability. And maybe at that 31 days, you go, okay, what is my relationship with this like right now? Do I want to continue the mute? Do I want to continue to swap it maybe for a mocktail? Or maybe I manage now and I say, I'm only going to drink Thursdays through Saturdays, right? So you kind of see how these all can flow together. And then block is for the things that we are completely eliminating. Like for me, and I think you could maybe relate to this too, we are going to block narcissists, right? Like I blocked my narcissist, like no going back, no creeping on the social media or anything like that. Like that is for things that's where things go to die. Okay. That's where block comes into play, things we no longer have space or room for in our lives.
I love this so much. And it's interesting because what just popped up for me, you mentioned at the beginning that it's not about like blowing everything up and like scorched earth policy. But I think for me, the same kind of absolutist black and white thinking that leads to if I only have 10 minutes to work out, I'm doing nothing, leads to like, if I need to take a break from this, I'm done. Like that there's no in between, even sometimes with people, like thinking in these really rigid, all or nothing ways of relating to relationships, people, whole areas of our life. Have you noticed that? Do you think that there's a crossover there?
Absolutely. Like I think that this whole black and white living in extremes can really get us stuck in different things. And so that's why I love that resonated for you and you're like, "Oh, wait, I can actually think of examples in my own life." And that's what I love about this filter with unsubscribe is I have certain ways that I've applied it or that I think people will apply it and what they'll relate to. But it's simple to apply. That's why I only have 4 pillars because it really can encompass everything. But the way that people apply it to their own lives, whether it's at work or their personal lives, is so vast. And for me to hear that from you already, like that's really the most rewarding part.
I love that. And yeah, what comes up for me is that what's that quote like, when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Like if you just like block as the only tool, you're like, block just gets applied across the board. I'm just blocking everything. And I think that there's a lot of kind of pop psych self-help conversation online about like protecting your peace and removing your energy from places that don't serve you that really are all kind of block coded. And I think there's always a pendulum swing in cultural trends, right? So we're seeing this pendulum swing, especially for women and femmes, away from be completely accommodating and take everything that everyone gets you and have no boundaries and like orient your entire life around how much you do for others to, remove yourself from every situation that doesn't protect your peace. And what I'm hearing here is like there's this um more nuanced way of approaching things where not everything needs to be complete permanent removal. Not everything needs to be cutting people completely off. Not everything is just yes or no, that there's different ways to manage and organize the commitments in our lives, the relationships in our lives, the people in our lives. And I think
Yes.
that's what pendulum swings requires. Like it's okay for it to radically swing one direction and then we want to like settle somewhere in the middle, hopefully.
Okay, the joy that you probably just saw in my face as I was like, she's already using the language. She's already using manage and incorporating the language. And you're right. I think we do see a lot of these pendulum swings. And I love that you use the word nuanced because it is. Like, yes, that's why I say it's simple, right? Like the principles are simple, the pillars are simple, but it is nuanced in how you apply it. And oh, there was another word that you used. You said nuanced and like the extremes of like, the overly used words of like, oh, protecting my peace, right? You have to be you have to be accountable with the decisions that you make. Like not everything can be overdone. And when overdone, that's also not a healthy place to be. That's why, like you said, I think we have to have multiple options to determine what is working for you right now, what isn't, and also what is.
And what arises for me as we're talking about this is that fully opting out, like fully blocking, fully removing people protecting your peace, one of the things that may be more difficult to look at is that sometimes that is an easier option for someone who is conflict avoidant, lacks skills with setting boundaries, feels uncomfortable saying no, because having a more nuanced conversation, first with yourself and then with another person about what you're available for and what you're not, gives them an opportunity to respond. There's room for them to you have to be with their disappointment. There's all these things that have to happen. I also think, and maybe you can relate to this as someone who's I've also been in a narcissistic abusive relationship. And I've also been in a lot of codependent relationships where one of the hallmarks of it is that you say nothing, say nothing, say nothing, say nothing, as things that you don't like that actually don't work for you kind of pile up until one day you just go, I'm fully blocking, I'm fully removing. So all of the conversation possibility, now, not with narcissists, there's no talking to them, but with reasonable people in your life, all of the conversations that could have been had along the way where you potentially go, I'm a yes for this, but not for that. I'm a yes for this, but only in this way or in these circumstances. How would you feel if we did it this way? You've opted out of all of those conversations and you haven't had to build skill or capacity for them if everything is either I'm all in or I'm all out.
Absolutely. And from my experience, healthy relationships and people that are meant to stay in your life are going to respect boundaries. They're going to be able to and want to have healthy conversations, and they will care if they have hurt your feelings, if they have made you uncomfortable, if they have in some way, even if it's inadvertently or unintentionally, insulted you or offended you, right? And so it is a skill, though. If you have been in toxic relationships or narcissistic relationships and you have felt like your voice isn't heard, you haven't felt psychological or emotional safety, which is relationship, the foundation of what healthy relationships should look like, you do have to start to build that skill. So I think it's important to work on that with your close relationships so that you can continue to get better at it with the relationships that you're continuing to foster and build and grow and develop.
Absolutely. And I think, this leads us really well into how this plays out in work environments because I'm from San Francisco, so I grew up during the dot-com boom, right? I'm watching friends work at companies. I've worked at startups. A lot of startup culture has bled its way into entrepreneurship and solopreneur culture. And because of my age and my work experience, I didn't have a lot of corporate experience outside of startup world. Startup world is really particular in a way that a lot of people don't fully know about because it's about VC funding. So if you're working at a startup that's gotten VC funding and they're like, we have 3 months to show that we can do this. The company culture is everyone is mission driven. We all really care about this startup and we all work around the clock and no one goes home. And there's catered food and Nerf guns and roller skates in the office. And it's so fun, but it's because you don't go home. And even though on paper you have work hours and you have breaks, the expectation is that no one takes them. And I think there are a lot of jobs like that where there is a real consequence for going home at 5. There is a real consequence for not taking work home with you and not answering emails at 11 p.m. And you kind of know that even though on paper there's going to be a nod to work life balance and they're going to say that they support you as a person and they want you to have hobbies and blah, 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 that the way everyone behaves inside the company is that you could potentially lose your spot or risk not being promoted if you say no, if you go home, if you manage your boundaries. And so I think there is a real lived experience of like, I know what the consequences are also, especially if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, right? In a corporate environment, being like, I have to outperform everyone and everyone is trying to outperform everyone. So how do I have boundaries when some of my fear that there will be a real consequence is founded? It's founded in this experience.
So I think from my perspective, this reminds me a little bit of like, yeah, it's a similar concept for, say, attorneys, right? They graduate from law school and then they're an associate and they are doing the hours, the grind, but they know they have to do that for a certain amount of time. And that's kind of what you explained. I love that you use the example of, okay, so if you know that this is kind of the grind and the hustle for 3 months or whatever it is, only you can decide and determine if that 3 months is right for you. And then at that 3 month time point, if that's what you are told, you have a meeting with your supervisor or your boss, right? And say, okay, we had this, on for 3 months that this was going to be the work schedule. I have done my due diligence. What's next? Like something's got to give. I put in for my vacation time or whatever that looks like, right? So that would really be a manage. And so that you're managing your expectations, you have to manage your workload, what that timeline looks for you. But I do think that there are things that you can put into place like that. Like, okay, I know that these are the expectations, what this is going to look like. And at that time point, then maybe you proactively schedule a meeting with your supervisor, talk about the expectations that have been met, exceeded, etc. Even though, especially because you don't always get, say, an annual review, or maybe it's not something that you could handle, that kind of a workload for a full year, right? That sounds like a lot.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of people who either A, work in jobs where that is kind of the expectation. Again, it's like on paper, they don't say it, but that's the way the environment is. And they've watched other people be passed over for promotions or full on not be there anymore if they've tried to have a more reasonable work life balance. But I also see that people take that type of work approach into their own businesses. And they're like, when I'm my own boss, I'm not going to be like that. I'm not going to work like that. I'm going to set like a regular number of work hours and I'm not going to work that much. And then they build that exact same type of work culture into their own business where they are working around the clock. They're over delivering for every client. They're allowing scope creep on every project. And so there, I think we get into the realm, well, two things. One of like scarcity and fear. Like if I'm not working around the clock, I'm not going to make any money. And then the other, I think gets into like fear of disappointing people.
Yeah, you lead by example. And I used to be that kind of leader that worked around the clock when I was in corporate. It wasn't even until about 10 years ago where when I took a vacation, I was leading a team of like, I don't know, 10 people. And I would work every vacation. I'd bring my computer with, I'd bring my iPad with, everything. I was fully plugged in all of the time. And all that does is then makes your employees and your teams think that that's what they should be doing too. So you really do lead by example. And you know what? When I finally did unplug, and it was because I was 12 hours around, I was in Thailand. So it was like 12 hours on the other side of the world for me. When I unplugged, I came back refreshed. My team probably needed a nice break from me. and, and all the work was still there when I got back. So I think it's really important to understand how your own behavior and how you are leading your team sets the expectations for them. And you have to decide, is that what I want for them? Is that what I want them to feel? Because that's ultimately what they're going to remember is how you made them feel in their work environment.
It's so funny. I have a coaching client who is in leadership at a very large nonprofit. And she decided she was going to take 3 weeks away for her birthday. She actually just went on her trip. And she's basically using like all of her vacation time plus a little bit of unpaid time to do this trip. But it's a big birthday and it was what she wanted to do. And she was so proud. She messaged me and she's like, HR pulled me in and said, it's really unusual for a senior leader to take this much vacation time. And she said, it is unusual, isn't it? And then I'm like, that was it. And I was like, that's the best answer. I'm so proud of you.
Perfect. Let's normalize it.
Yeah, it is unusual, isn't it? Huh. Okay, well, thanks for writing it up. Bye. So good.
That's such a great response.
It's just perfect. Just like, yeah, I guess it is. So good. So if somebody, here's the thing I can like hear, I can feel it in the audience right now as they're listening. They're like, yeah, sure. This is all well and good. But the idea of having a conversation with someone where I have to tell them no or tell them I'm not available for something or ask to do it a different way makes me feel like I'm going to throw up. What do you tell them?
Especially for high performers, for some of the things that you mentioned earlier, like recovering people pleasers and perfectionists. What happens is we find ourselves starting to over-explain, give a list of excuses, a whole list of reasons why we can't. Sometimes less is more. Just saying, I'm unavailable for that. And then stop and sit with it. You might be surprised because I think when we get in that trap of starting to over-explain and give all of the reasons and like, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't do that, but, we go down this over-explaining path, we start filling in gaps and start saying things and then probably talk yourself into just being like, okay, you know what, I'll just do it anyway. But if you just stop and pause and just say, I'm unavailable, you'd be surprised at what that might be met with. And just try it.
Yeah. I wonder, I just am thinking about the person who is like, I don't even get that far. I don't even get as far as the conversation. Or here's one I see a lot. I get so worried about the conversation that I avoid it for way too long. And then I feel weird because of how long it's taken me to respond. And I don't know how to get back into it. How do we shorten the time between when we know that something is not a right fit for us and when we come back to the table for a conversation?
Okay, that I could totally put myself in that person's shoes the way that you were explaining. Like, and I was getting anxious about it. Think about a time when you sat there and talked yourself into being anxious about something because you did wait, right? And you have these mental loops going on in your head. And then by the time you finally did address it, oh my gosh, the relief that you have from it. So another option could be, I'm not available for that, but I could do this, right? So you give them an alternative that does work for you. And then it kind of puts you back in control and puts you on the terms, but you're still offering something. And then it doesn't feel as much of like a hard no that you're not participating. And the more you do that, I think people are afraid that they might not be respected when they start to say no. But again, the right people are going to respect you even more. It might take a little bit of getting used to for you not always being available for every single thing and being that people pleaser and kind of letting yourself get walked on if it is to that point. But again, maybe offer an alternative instead of just a hard no can sometimes be a really great way to take that next step towards a more firm no or to get there faster.
Yeah. All of these things like get so tied together, right? The people pleasing, perfectionism, high achieving, not wanting to disappoint people, wanting to climb a ladder, right? All of these things can get so mixed together. But I think one of the things they also all point to is overgiving, is people who are kind of chronic overgivers. And I know one of the things that you talk about is like how to stop overgiving. And I guess the first question I would have is if you're that person, especially if it's a point of pride, if you're like, maybe you don't even classify it as overgiving. Maybe you're like, I over deliver. How do you start to realize when you're not just performing, not just delivering, but actually over giving so that you can start to pull back?
Well, I can give you my own personal experience with this. I love to use the word over functioning. And so that's kind of how you know you're over functioning is oftentimes, unfortunately, like for me, your body will tell you. So when I was at the peak of over functioning, and also actually one thing that I heard before is when you're over giving, when you're people pleasing, when you're over functioning, you're lying. You're not being true to yourself, who you are and what you want. And that's what Unsubscribe is really designed to do, is help you get back in alignment and back to who you really are and back in alignment with yourself. So when I was over functioning, I was in this narcissistic, abusive relationship. I was being everything to everybody. He had 2 kids. They lived here with me. I was doing school pickups, drop-offs. I was doing the laundry, the grocery shopping, the cooking, making sure the house was clean and the lawn was mowed, paying all the bills, uh, just managing everything, keeping friendships, having a rigid workout routine. Like I was over functioning in every level. And at the peak of it, I had precancerous skin lesions removed. My hair all broke off and fell out, and I got shingles on my face in my 30s, which is not normal. So oftentimes I think our bodies can tell us if we're paying attention to the signs. And again, this is all hindsight. And this is, I think, why you and I both probably do the work that we do so that other people don't have to experience what we've been through. I know that's a big part of it for me. So oftentimes our bodies are telling us if you have, IBS, chronic, migraines, stomach issues, your body is probably telling you that you are doing too much, you're over functioning, you're over delivering, whatever word you want to use to describe it.
Absolutely. Were you an athlete or a dancer growing up?
Oh, definitely not a dancer. But yeah, no, I played a very competitive volleyball. I like year round. I was in the Junior Olympics program, and we played very competitive volleyball, which I loved. And then I also played the piano. So music is like a huge thing for me.
I also played the piano, but
We're like twinning.
twinning. Okay, so here's why I ask. I have a theory about this. I was a dancer growing up. Dancers and athletes, right? Same thing. Same. Um, People who spend a large portion of their life needing to be able to function at a high level while in what a normal person would consider pain, and that we just consider kind of like a low level or consistent level of discomfort. Because when you're an athlete, like something always hurts, you're always sore. There's always like, you're like, oh yeah, like my right hip is kind of out of whack today, but we have practice. Oh, I like hurt my wrist in practice, but we have a game. Being able to function in that environment requires you to continue to pile work on top of being in physical discomfort and kind of like clocking it. Like you might be like, oh yeah, my hip's out of whack today. And then you just set it aside and you're like, but we have to keep going. I think that athletes and dancers are really prime candidates for overfunctioning and for relationships where we get taken advantage of, for chronic physical symptoms of I'm out of alignment, but that we don't clock or process because living with low grade discomfort feels like our normal and our baseline. I remember being in college and I had a test that got canceled and I had had a cough for a while. And I was like, oh, because this test got canceled, I have time to stop by the student center, like the student medical center, and go get this cough checked out. And so I like walked in and they checked me out and they like came back in and they were like, you have bronchitis and pharyngitis and you're about a day away from walking pneumonia and you have a fever and we don't know how you're functional. And I was taking like 23 units. I was in a dance company. I was like, I had a job. I was commuting 2 hours a day. And I was like, yeah, like I wake up every day and I'm like, oh, today my right hip is out. My ankle hurts a little bit from rehearsal. I'm sore all over and I have this little cough. And you just keep going. Like the chronic low grade discomfort that is part of your life just bleeds over into being able to carry a lot of physical symptoms that are your body trying to tell you that something's off and ignore them, for lack of a better, normalize them.
Yeah, that's a great word, normalizing it. Yeah, it's so interesting. I haven't thought about this like for decades, but I had in volleyball, I had what was called a floater serve. And so it would go over the net and then it would move at the last minute. So I would get aces all of the time. So I was like the clutch server that they always had in. And then all of a sudden one day I couldn't serve. Like I kept hitting the net and like couldn't figure out, and my shoulder hurt so bad. And I tried to push through it, tried to work through it, and finally went to the doctor, had to go to the orthopedic surgeon, and I had separated my shoulder and was continuing just to, just push through it. And I do think that does tie into and bleeds into this whole hustle culture that we live in, right? Like more, 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 more. And my whole theory is debunking that. More, more, more is not the answer. I think it was at one point. I definitely think it was the answer, like in my dad's generation. When my dad was in his 50s, like nearing his 60s in retirement, he was commuting like you 2 hours every day. He was working 12-hour days. And, it was like you go to work, you're the first one there, you work the longest, you work the hardest, you get a promotion, you get a bigger salary, you get a bonus, you get and that was very linear, you know, um, like this very linear line to success and what identified success. And to me, I think it's not. Like I want to debunk all of that. So like that's what unsubscribe is all about. It's actually what we don't is as important as what we do. So the idea is to do less, but with intention. Because think about how much stuff you've done today that doesn't actually matter. And when you're so busy, everyone's busy, but when you're constantly busy, are you actually being productive? The problem is that we're focusing on too much of the wrong things, so we can't actually put our time and energy into what truly matters. And that's what I want to help people with this whole shift.
Yeah. Abnormalize being in constant low grade discomfort. Start to check
Yes.
in. Start to be like, maybe it is not normal for me to feel so uncomfortable in my day. Maybe it's not normal for me to. One of the things I think about a lot is like on those physical symptoms is like my stomach starts to hurt on my way to work. And just like maybe we don't normalize that. Maybe we start to pause and go, perhaps that is something I should pay attention to and take as a signal rather than just being like, yes, that's my day. That's a normal thing that happens to me.
Or every time you have to see someone, a family member, a friend, a parent, and you have stomach issues, right? Like if it's a person, like you said, I love that you use the example, like if every day you're getting into your car and you're driving to work and you have a stomach ache, maybe that's a sign that you should pay attention to.
Yeah. I strongly believe that like our body, our emotions, they are sacred signals. They are here to guide you in the same way that like your nerve endings, when you go to touch something hot or sharp, go pull your hand back. Your body is constantly giving you so much valuable information. And so, yeah, living in a culture where priding yourself on being able to override discomfort and perform anyway is really counter to how our systems are designed to function and guide us through our lives, right? Move toward something that feels better. Move toward not sharp.
Very well said. I love it.
So, where can people find you? Where can people find the book? How can they get more information?
Look, I like to keep things simple. So everything is just my name. So my website is Ginny Priem, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Ginny Priem. And on my website, I have my book linked. So you can, grab that there just to keep things really simple and streamlined.
Amazing. And if you have one final message for anyone listening who's like, "Ooh, I think I need to unsubscribe from a lot of things," what would you like to tell them?
Ooh, I actually think what I want to do is tie back into something that you just recently said about our emotions and feelings. So in my second book, which is actually a guided journal, it's called I'm My Favorite. One of my favorite quotes that I have in there, and it's my own, but which I don't mean to for that to be cheesy, but it's that your thoughts create your feelings. Your feelings shape your mood, and your mood becomes your reality. And so and I really just feel like that ties up so much of our conversation, Sarah, because we talked about like the physical part, the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts that we have. I feel like that kind of puts a nice bow on it. So like, be gentle with yourself, pay attention to what you're telling yourself, how that's making you feel, and how that's really shaping your reality. And there are different examples, like especially in unsubscribe with the swap, right? Like we can swap these negative thoughts for more positive ones, and you'll start to see a really big shift in how that impacts your mood and then your reality. So I think that's kind of an important one that just puts a nice little bow on our conversation that we had.
I love that so much. So I will be putting Ginny's links in the show notes. Make sure to grab the book Unsubscribe and check out her podcast Unsubscribe. And if you want more on this from me, I have two little mini courses that are pay what you can. One is called The Art of Saying Yes Less. So if the idea of saying no to someone makes you feel like you're going to vomit, this is a somatic course. So it's working it through your body to get your body regulated. And there are even scripts on how to say no and how to have some of these conversations that you can grab. And there's one specifically for business owners. It's just called Boundaries for Business Owners. And those are both pay what you can starting at $1. So I'll put the links to those in the show notes as well. Get boundaried up in all areas. Get comfortable saying what you mean and meaning what you say to the people in your life, and see if your stomach doesn't hurt anymore. Ginny, thank you so much for being here. It was a delight to talk with you.
Thank you for having me.
That's our episode for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I know there are so many things that you could be doing with your day, so many things you could be listening to, and it means so much that you are here in this community. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment, share it on social media, and tag me at Intuitive Edge Coaching. Share it with a biz bestie who you think needs to hear it and will appreciate it. And take a moment to to subscribe, and to leave a 5-star review wherever you are listening. It helps me grow this show, and it helps us grow and sustain this brilliant community of entrepreneurs dedicated to doing the inner work. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, love you. Bye.